Right, let's get this started. Welcome to the channel, everyone. Today we're strapping ourselves to a rocket of speculation and blasting headfirst into the year 2025. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. We're talking military advancements that sound like they came straight out of a Schwarzenegger movie. Political shifts that'll make your head spin faster than a politician trying to explain a campaign donation. And of course, we'll be taking a long, hard look at the elephant in the room, climate change. If we had a crystal ball, we'd be on a beach sipping Mai Tais. But we've done our homework and consulted experts. So, without further ado, let's dive into 2025. Don't worry, we'll be your guide through this hellscape of uncertainty. First up, let's talk military advancements. When have humans ever met a problem they didn't try to solve by throwing more weapons at it? 2025 is shaping up to be a buffet of military innovation. Think autonomous drones, swarming the skies like angry bees with laser beams. AI-powered systems can analyze battlefields faster than you can say mutually assured destruction. With advancements in robotics, we could see more robots on the battlefield than ever before. They're like really expensive, highly trained Roombas with a penchant for explosives. Moving on from the terrifying world of killer robots, let's talk alliances. In global politics, today's enemy is tomorrow's frenemy. Alliances shift faster than a politician's stance on a hot-button issue. Unlikely partnerships emerge, driven by shared interests or common enemies. It's like a high-stakes game of diplomatic musical chairs. Experts suggest stronger ties between certain Asian and African nations. And don't forget the rise of non-state actors, like corporations and hacktivist groups. It's enough to make you long for the simpler days of the Cold War. No discussion of military predictions would be complete without addressing the emerging threats. History has taught us that just when you think it's safe, something new and terrifying comes along. From cyber warfare, turning off the power grid while draining your bank account, to the weaponization of space, turning the cosmos into a giant game of celestial laser tag, and the ever-present threat of terrorism, a constantly shifting landscape. Just another day in paradise, folks. Just another day. Now, let's move on to the thrilling world of politics, where the stakes are high, the drama is never-ending, and the haircuts are often questionable. In 2025, the global power balance is looking shakier than a Jenga tower built by a toddler on a roller coaster. The old guard, those countries that have been calling the shots for decades, are facing challenges from rising powers eager to claim their place at the table. It's like watching a particularly intense game of Risk, except the players are all wearing suits, and instead of dice, they're using economic sanctions and military posturing. China continues its ascent, flexing its economic muscles and expanding its influence around the world. Meanwhile, the United States, once the undisputed heavyweight champion of global politics, is grappling with internal divisions and a foreign policy that's more unpredictable than a squirrel on a sugar rush. And let's not forget about the European Union, which is still trying to figure out its identity after Brexit. Like a divorced couple awkwardly trying to share custody of the dog. It's a multipolar world, folks. And the only thing that's certain is that nothing is certain, except maybe death, taxes, and the fact that politicians will always find new and creative ways to disappoint us. Speaking of disappointments, let's talk elections. Because nothing says fun for the whole family like watching a bunch of politicians desperately trying to convince us that they're not all completely terrible. And 2025 is shaping up to be a banner year for elections around the world. From presidential races in major democracies to parliamentary elections in smaller nations, there will be no shortage of opportunities for voters to exercise their democratic rights, or at least scroll through endless social media posts about how terrible all the candidates are. In the United States, we'll be gearing up for another presidential election, and if the past is any indication, it's going to be a real barn burner. Expect to see a lot of mudslinging, a lot of empty promises, and a lot of debates that will leave you feeling dumber than you did before you watched them. But hey, at least it's not just an American problem. From Brazil to India to Indonesia, voters around the world will be heading to the polls to choose their leaders. And if you think your country's politics are messed up, just be grateful you don't live in a place where the election results are decided by a coin toss or a cage match between the candidates. Let's talk about policy shifts. Because nothing says exciting like a good old-fashioned policy wonk-out. Policy changes can have a profound impact on our lives, even if they don't always make for the most riveting television. In 2025, expect significant shifts in trade, immigration, and climate change. It's enough to make your head spin faster than a politician explaining a scandal. Trade wars have made a roaring comeback as countries protect their industries. It's a global game of economic chicken, and nobody wants to blink first. Immigration remains a hot-button issue, balancing newcomers and borders. Climate change makes all other issues look like a walk in the park. Expect drastic policy changes aimed at reducing emissions and mitigating damage. The future of our planet depends on it. No pressure, policymakers. Alright, buckle up, because this section isn't exactly a picnic in the park. We're diving headfirst into the murky, often depressing world of ongoing conflicts. And look, I get it. Talking about war isn't exactly the light-hearted stuff of cat videos and viral dance crazes. But much like that weird rash you've been ignoring, these things don't just magically disappear if you don't acknowledge them. From the seemingly intractable Syrian civil war, a conflict so messy it makes your average Thanksgiving dinner look civil, to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Yemen, a country that's basically become a real-life game of risk gone horribly wrong, the world is sadly no stranger to protracted and brutal conflicts. And let's not forget the ongoing tensions in places like the South China Sea, a body of water that's rapidly becoming the geopolitical equivalent of your uncle after one too many beers at a family barbecue, volatile, unpredictable, and with a high chance of someone saying something they'll regret. Now, if you thought the current state of global affairs was about as fun as a root canal performed by a mime with a rusty spoon, well, I hate to break it to you, but things could get a whole lot worse. Because while dealing with existing conflicts would be more than enough for any sane person, the world, much like that friend who insists on ordering tequila shots at 2 a.m., never seems to know when to quit. We're talking about potential flashpoints, those powder kegs just waiting for the right spark to set the world ablaze. Think simmering tensions in Eastern Europe, territorial disputes in the Arctic, and the ever-present threat of cyber warfare, which, let's be honest, sounds less like a Tom Clancy novel and more like something out of a Black Mirror episode. And then there's the whole issue of resource scarcity, a problem that's only going to get worse as the world becomes increasingly crowded and desperate. Remember that Mad Max movie? Yeah, let's try to avoid making that a reality, shall we? Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is all getting a bit too bleak, even for a cynical Brit like myself. We need a glimmer of hope, a beacon of light in this increasingly dark world. Well, how about those brave souls in blue helmets? Yes, I'm talking about the United Nations peacekeepers, the international equivalent of that one friend who always tries to break up a fight at a party. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that peacekeeping is always effective. Let's be honest, the UN often finds itself caught between a rock and a hard place, dealing with complex situations with limited resources. But despite their flaws, peacekeeping efforts do offer a glimmer of hope. They represent a commitment, however flawed, to a world where diplomacy trumps violence, where dialogue replaces drone strikes, and where the only things getting blown up are, well, hopefully just birthday candles. All right, let's talk about climate change, shall we? That delightful little cocktail of rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and politicians pretending it's not happening. It's the equivalent of ignoring a fire alarm because you're trying to finish your toast. By 2025, the effects of climate change will be about as subtle as a Slipknot concert in a library. We're talking more extreme weather events, folks. More hurricanes with names that sound like rejected Bond villains. More heat waves so intense they could melt the skepticism of even the most ardent climate change denier. And let's not forget about rising sea levels, slowly turning coastal cities into Atlantis-themed water parks. The thing is, this isn't just about the environment, folks. Climate change is a threat multiplier. It exacerbates existing problems like poverty, conflict, and the global refugee crisis. Imagine a world where entire nations are displaced because their homes are underwater. It's not exactly a recipe for global stability, is it? Now, some people might say, John, this all sounds terribly depressing. Can't we talk about something a bit more cheerful? Like, I don't know, the potential collapse of the global economy. And to them I say, look, you're already halfway there with this line of questioning, so buckle up. Because climate change isn't just an environmental problem, it's an economic nightmare waiting to happen. Extreme weather events disrupt supply chains, damage infrastructure, and lead to massive insurance claims. It's like trying to run a business in the middle of a hurricane, except the hurricane never really ends. And don't even get me started on the agricultural impact. Imagine your local supermarket, but instead of shelves overflowing with produce, there's just a tumbleweed and a sign that says, "Sorry, the crops are flooded again." It's not exactly a recipe for a stable economy, is it? The World Bank estimates that by 2050, climate change could push over 100 million people into poverty. That's 100 million people who might be forced to choose between fleeing their homes or staying and facing the consequences. And let's be honest, those consequences probably involve a lot more tumbleweeds. Now, I know what you're thinking, John. This is all so bleak. Is there any hope at all? And to that I say, well, it depends on what you consider hopeful. Look, the situation is dire, there's no denying that. But it's not entirely hopeless. The world is finally starting to wake up to the reality of climate change. Governments are implementing policies to reduce emissions, businesses are investing in renewable energy, and individuals are making changes in their own lives. Is it enough? Honestly, it's too early to say. Will we manage to get our act together in time to avert the worst-case scenarios? I don't know. I'm a comedian, not a fortune teller. Although, let's be honest, the future is looking pretty bleak if this is what counts as comedy these days. But the point is, folks, giving up isn't an option. We have a responsibility to fight for the future, even if that future feels about as certain as a game of Jenga played during an earthquake. Because if we don't, well, let's just say the only thing hotter than the planet in 2025 will be the sheer level of regret we'll all be feeling. All right, let's talk about the future, shall we? Specifically, the future of technology. Because by 2025, things are going to get weird. And by weird, I mean even weirder than that time Elon Musk launched a car into space. Remember that? What was that all about? First up, artificial intelligence. Now, I know what you're thinking. John, is this going to be another one of those segments where you warn us about robots taking over the world? And to that I say, look, I'm not ruling anything out at this point. But in all seriousness, AI is poised to revolutionize pretty much every aspect of our lives. We're talking self-driving cars that can navigate rush hour traffic better than a New York City taxi driver. We're talking personalized medicine tailored to your individual DNA. We're talking robots that can fold laundry, which, let's be honest, is the closest humanity will ever come to achieving world peace. But here's the thing about AI. It's only as good as the data we feed it. And if we're not careful, we could end up creating a world where algorithms perpetuate existing biases and inequalities. Imagine a world where your social credit score determines your access to healthcare or education. It's like Black Mirror, but with more targeted advertising. Next up, let's talk about the metaverse. Or as I like to call it, that thing Mark Zuckerberg is really excited about for some reason. Essentially, it's a persistent virtual world where you can work, play, and potentially get trapped forever in a digital hellscape of your own making. By 2025, the metaverse is predicted to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, which, let's be honest, is a lot of money to spend on something that essentially boils down to wearing a headset and pretending to be somewhere else. It's like the world's most expensive form of escapism. But here's the thing. The metaverse has the potential to be more than just a glorified video game. It could revolutionize education, healthcare, and even the way we work. Imagine attending a virtual lecture by a world-renowned expert from the comfort of your own home, or undergoing surgery performed by a robot controlled by a doctor on the other side of the world. Of course, there are also potential downsides, like what happens when our virtual lives become more compelling than our real ones, or when corporations use the metaverse to collect even more data on us. It's enough to make you want to throw away your smartphone and move to a yurt in the woods. So there you have it, a glimpse into the wild, weird, and potentially terrifying world of 2025. It's a world where artificial intelligence is ubiquitous, the metaverse is booming, and Elon Musk is probably trying to colonize Mars with a team of robot butlers. But here's the thing about the future. It's not predetermined. The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow. So, If you'll excuse me, I'm off to invest in a good pair of noise-cancelling headphones and a one-way ticket to the most remote island I can find. Because frankly, I've had enough of the future for one day. Well, there you have it. 5 predictions for 2025 that are sure to leave you feeling either wildly optimistic or deeply terrified. Or let's be honest, probably a healthy dose of both. Remember though, this is just our take on how things might shake out. If you enjoyed this descent into potential chaos, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more insightful and hopefully not entirely inaccurate predictions. And be sure to let us know in the comments what you think will happen in 2025. Will we have flying cars? Will robots have taken over our jobs? Will we finally have figured out a way to get Mark Zuckerberg to stop talking about the metaverse? Only time will tell. But hey, at least we'll have each other to commiserate with when the robots inevitably rise up.